So, Jose Mourinho's reunion with Manchester United ended with the Portuguese watching from the stands. The Fenerbahce boss was sent off during their 1-1 draw with United in Istanbul. Jay Bothroyd, alongside me, was watching the game. A third straight draw in the Europa League for Manchester United. Anything to get excited about?
No, I'm sorry to say. I mean, I was looking forward to the game tonight. I mean, they chose a strong team. I think the talking point was Mazraoui playing as a number 10. Everyone, I think, that see that was really? Is he playing as a number 10? But yeah, he started off that way and he was involved in the goal. But it was Fenerbahce who absolutely dominated the game. First half, they was like 63% possession. They created better chances. They was more dynamic. They controlled the tempo of the game. Again, it's just like you look at the Man United players that are there, like Garnacho, Xerxes, Rashford, and you can't help but think, why are they not performing? Why are they not performing to their ability? Because they're top players. They are top players. The only person you can look at is Ten Hag, his coaching staff, him as a manager. That's the only reason why fans, people look at Man United now and say, why are these players playing so badly? That's why there's questions asked of him. I mean, Mazraoui playing as the number 10. When they changed that and put Eriksen in that number 10 position, they started playing better football. In the second half, they had I think it was 49% possession. So they improved there, they controlled more of the game. But still, that cutting edge has lacked Man United all this season.
Yeah, and not to be able to beat Twente, Porto and Fenerbahce in the Europa League. 3 draws in a row, as I say. We mentioned it before, Jose Mourinho. I mean, I suppose inevitable, he's a magnet to the headlines, sent off. What did you make of the decision?
I thought it was a bit harsh, to be honest. I mean, he was in his... I don't know obviously, we can't hear what's been said down there, but, there was a penalty that he thought was a penalty. I mean, when he looks at it back, it was Osei Samuel, and it was definitely a dive. So he's probably going to have a word with Osei Samuel. Maybe he'll have to pay that fine for Mourinho. But, I mean, ultimately, Mourinho, he wears his heart on his sleeve. He's very passionate about the game. He thought it was a foul. And he just held his hands up and he was saying, how's that? What's that? Why haven't you give a penalty? And the referee came over and gave him a red card, and he's standing in the stands, like that iconic, Arsene Wenger moment where he's got his arms out. But again, I thought it was harsh, and maybe he got that red card for his, the history of, his moments that we've seen throughout.
Yeah, well, 1-1 it finished, and Manchester United, it always seems Erik Ten Hag is 1 or 2 matches away from ultimately potentially losing his job. Well, we'll see. Jay, thank you for your company.
Thank you.
Now then, what about Tottenham? They maintained their 100% start to the Europa League, making it 3 wins out of 3, with victory over AZ Alkmaar. Ange Postecoglou making 9 changes from the side that beat West Ham. The decisive moment came 6 minutes into the second half. Richarlison fouled in the box. He was the one to take the penalty and scored his first goal of the season. AZ fullback David Müller-Wölfe was sent off after receiving 2 yellow cards with 5 minutes to play. Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. And joining us are Jonathan New, sports writer at The Guardian, Jason Burt, chief football correspondent at The Telegraph. Welcome along to you both, gents. We'll hear from you shortly. Let's quickly run you through the back pages as we have them so far. The Guardian depicts Jose Mourinho in the face of match officials, and that was shortly before he was sent off. There's also quadruple talk from Liverpool's Dimit Tsimikas. Now, The Telegraph goes deeper on that match between Fenerbahce and Manchester United and says that defensive frailties have cost Erik Ten Hag's side. Mourinho also makes the back page of the Mail. So too does a story that has Arsenal keeping an eye on Alexander Isak's situation at Newcastle. Chelsea went big on their changes, but they got a great win in Greece. The Mirror's digital platform is focusing on Joao Felix as he tries to make his way into Enzo Maresca's first-choice team, set up twice by Mykhailo Mudryk, who also scored. OK, well, evening again, Jonathan, Jason. Let's start off. Where else? Manchester United. So this 1-1 draw with Fenerbahce, of course, we see Jose Mourinho pictured there in a lot of the back pages. Always attracts the headlines, of course he does. But I just wonder, Jason, again, on United, You know, when they've had these chances to relieve the pressure, they sort of did it against Brentford, but then plunged into this horrible, awkward situation where we're, again, speculating on Erik Ten Hag's future.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, if you look at this game, obviously they were winning again. It's the third European game in a row that they've been pegged back and had to settle for a draw, which hasn't been satisfactory. It's now a calendar year since they won a game in Europe. If you look at it in isolation, you'd say it's not a terrible result, but obviously in the context of this season, in the context of the pressure Erik Ten Hag is under and the scrutiny he's facing, it just doesn't feel very satisfactory. And it's almost like a continual theme with Manchester United that most games just don't feel very satisfactory. And so, you know, the battle lines are drawn to an extent. There are those who have clearly made their minds up about Erik Ten Hag. There are those who still support him. And there doesn't seem to be any sort of conclusive argument either way. And this seems to be reflected in the games that they're playing. You know, as I say, you can look at this game and think, actually, okay, you know, a point away from home is not terrible in the context of playing in Turkey and playing Fenerbahce and playing a Jose Mourinho team. But actually, they kind of needed to win this game. And once they got themselves ahead, you think, well, okay, fine, well, you know, go on and win it. And actually, you could probably argue they were lucky not to lose it. So I think it just all feels a little bit, you know, as I say, unsatisfactory. And it's difficult to reach a conclusion beyond the fact that, you know, it does also feel inevitable at some point in the next few weeks or months that there will be some sort of change at Manchester United, because he doesn't seem to be able to arrest that sort of feeling, really. He does manage to pull out a result every now and again, but it doesn't never seem to be in the right sort of direction in terms of the overall picture at the club. And it's, again, one of those results and performances you look at and think, well, you decide what you want to decide from it.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3 points for United in the Europa League. It should be 9. As you said, Jason, they've been ahead in all of the games, against Twente, against Porto, and then also against Fenerbahce. Interesting choice of number 10 today, and that was Nusayr Mazraoui. Jonathan, what did you make of it?
Yeah, it was a weird one. I'm not sure. You know, he certainly wasn't United's worst performer, but I'm not sure. Well, first of all, I'm not 100% convinced in the merit of the experiment, because I don't think it's kind of a viable or realistic option for the long term. I don't think we're going to see this option repeated. I kind of like to have seen Eriksen up in that role, actually, because, you know, we all know he can play number 10, and we all know what he can do. And obviously, he scored the opening goal tonight. I'd have been quite interested to see what he did in that role, but. I mean, I come back to Jason's point about them giving up leads. It's you know, you kind of look at how United basically went to pieces for periods of that game, and you look around the pitch and thinking, where is the leadership coming from? Where is the impetus coming from? Who is dragging up standards? And sometimes that can come from you know, players on the pitch. You know, Bruno Fernandes does that a lot for them, and sometimes that comes from the touchline. It comes from the, you know, the personality of the coach on the bench, and I'm not seeing that from Erik Ten Hag either. So what you're getting is, and in Europe you are playing against high quality teams who know how to come back. They are used to winning. They know how to grind out results, and you know, they're coming up teams who are very good at picking off weaknesses and exploiting weaknesses. And United look like a team that just look a bit mentally soft at the moment.
Yeah, and you know, when you look at the games they've got coming up, West Ham. In one of the games at the weekend on Sunday. OK, they've got an EFL Cup game against Leicester City, but then it's Chelsea at home in the league in early November. These are crucial games. I mean, Jason, what do you make of this next phase of games for Manchester United?
It does feel, as you say, crucial. You've got the international break then coming up after that, and it's a natural assumption that will be a period again when Manchester United will be reviewing Erik Ten Hag's future. We saw that in the last international break, and was sort of going from break to break, almost sort of seeing whether he can actually pick things up and get the results that he needs. And at the moment, as you say, they got past Brentford just about. They've got that result this evening. Neither performance was particularly satisfactory. They're going to go to West Ham and play them next, and obviously then Leicester City, Chelsea. So they need to start winning some games, not just winning some games, but winning them a bit more convincingly to actually sort of put this to bed. And I think this next international break has to really be crucial in terms of Ten Hag's future, because there will become a point where you kind of consider, you know, what is the value of carrying on with him, because we had that big review in the summer. We haven't seen a big improvement. We've seen a lot of money spent. We still don't quite know what Manchester United are trying to achieve in terms of the way they play. And it almost feels, as I said already, that they're kind of delaying the inevitable and that the change will have to be made. I mean, fair play to the club. They are trying to give him every opportunity to carry on. And actually, the match day going fans have been very supportive towards Ten Hag and United. I think that's obviously helped him as well. But it does, as I say, almost feel like they're delaying the inevitable and that they'll have to make a change sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and now, obviously we will wonder how the picture might have changed, perhaps with, Southgate now being succeeded by Thomas Tuchel, and that, is someone who's not now in the mix potentially to take over at Old Trafford. I guess we'll see. We've got to talk about Jose Mourinho, Jonathan. I mean, he is the man pictured on the back of pretty much every single paper. He loves it. This feels like pretty much typical pantomime villain stuff from Jose.
Yeah, he loves it. I mean, the headline writers love it, press love it. Social media loves it. As a wise man once said, this is football heritage. The interesting thing is, I mean, obviously we've seen a lot of Mourinho's antics on the touchline at Fenerbahce. You probably saw the laptop stunt that he pulled a couple of weeks ago. This isn't surprising in itself, but I think on a night like tonight, when obviously he knows all of the attention and the cameras and the focus is on him, this was actually a really good, strong, resilient, battling performance by Fenerbahce. The way they came back into the game, the way the crowd got into it, the way they they rode the way that they could easily have laid down and they didn't. And I think all of the focus of that performance has been taken away by Mourinho's outburst and whatever the rights and wrongs of what he did. I think he does he sucks that attention and energy and focus away from his team, and sometimes that works for the better. I think sometimes it does his players a slight disservice.
Let's move on to Chelsea. Big win for them in Greece, Jason, and with the likes of Joao Felix and Mykhailo Mudryk impressing. I mean, remember that Chelsea did spend an awful lot of money on those players, and indeed Christopher Nkunku. I mean, where do you feel these players fit in? Is it just in this competition, just in the Conference League, or can Joao Felix, for example, genuinely make it into his first team for a big Premier League game?
No, it's a really good question because, they made 11 changes tonight. I mean, that's extraordinary, really, that they can make 11 changes in an away game in Europe. Okay, Panathinaikos aren't a great side, but they're a famous old club, and you'd expect it to be quite a challenging place for them to go. But they made 11 changes and they won very, very comfortably. And you're looking at players, as you say, like Joao Felix, who was regarded as a sort of wonder kid of European football. He should be a Champions League player, not a Conference League player. And obviously Christopher Nkunku, again, a huge signing for them. Mudryk, another big signing. It does show the extraordinary sort of strength in depth they've got, I guess. But there's sort of slight part of me feels it's slightly, I don't want to criticise Chelsea, but it feels slightly vulgar, really, that you've got all these players and they're only playing in the Conference League at times. And it's like almost like an unfair situation that they can make so many changes, have such strength. But those players obviously all want to play more regularly in the Premier League and so on and so forth. But they've got great competition ahead of them. And I mean, Chelsea have spent an awful lot of money, but they have actually bought quite interestingly. And I think they could be quite an interesting force during the course of this season. But as I say, it does feel slightly, strange in a sense that they've got all these players and they're only appearing in this competition. It can't be really what Joao Felix expects at this point of his career, where he was regarded, as I say, as one of the great sort of, young players of European football. And we're only seeing him getting these sort of bit part appearances in the third tier of European competitions.
But I guess, Jonathan, this is what Enzo Maresca will have wanted to see, not just because it's a response after the defeat at Anfield, but also if you look at their next three games, Newcastle at home in the Premier League, then Newcastle away in the EFL Cup, and then Manchester United away in the Premier League. That competition for places and the ability to rotate confidently is something that Enzo Maresca will surely welcome.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you look at the team sheet and you think 11 changes, you think it's going to be a totally different team. But I mean, while the personnel are totally different, it is still an Enzo Maresca team. They're still playing in recognisably the same way. And I think, you mentioned those fixtures, but I actually look further down the line later in the season when the fixtures start to pile up, when injuries, form take their toll, and suddenly you have a plethora of options in each position. Say Nicholas Jackson gets injured, can Felix, can Nkunku do a job there? If Cole Palmer gets injured, Pedro Neto has a bank of games behind him. I think it's actually quite smart, and I really do take Jason's point about the vulgarity of it. I think it is kind of a slight waste of these wonderful players, but it is also quite smart to have these sort of to give these players, rotation and to give the first team a rest. And then later on in the season, you have, maybe 20, 25 players who are capable of challenging for a place in the first team, just as the fixtures begin to pile up and the injuries begin to bite.
Quick word on Spurs, a win for them as well, Jason, against AZ Alkmaar, and a goal to nil. It did the job, Richarlison with the winner. And it's now 6 wins in 7. In all competitions for Spurs. So despite that little blip at Brighton, which was obviously a sort of a major kind of, brain fade on that day, but, they've really got the momentum now, haven't they? And especially with the young players. Down that right-hand side, Gray, Bergford, Mikey Moore. I mean, this is really the future and the present.
I mean, I think James Maddison spoke after the game and said that, for 20 minutes, it was like having Neymar down one side with Mikey Moore. I guess some people might think that's not necessarily a compliment, actually, but I know what he means by that, obviously. But no, I mean, they're doing extremely well, especially in Europe, actually. I think it's 3 wins from 3. They're one of the 3 unbeaten teams in the competition. And they've got that sort of, attacking momentum now behind them. The funny thing always with Spurs is I look at them and think, oh, it's not been so great this season. But actually, it has been pretty good. But almost like one bad result is a massive setback for them. But obviously in Europe, they've done extremely well. And they've got, as you say, momentum now in all competitions. And it seems to be coming together quite well after a fairly sort of stodgy start to the season. I mean, they're looking pretty good.
They are. And just to mention, Rangers, they were 4-0 winners against Steaua Bucharest, and definitely a shot in the arm for Philippe Clement. OK, guys, we're going to take a quick break. Other side of which we will look at more of the back pages, including this in the Telegraph. And on the right there of the page, they report that clubs are alarmed by the latest proposals for a football regulator. More on that with Jonathan and Jason shortly. You are watching Back Pages tonight. Welcome back to Jonathan Liu, sports writer of The Guardian, and Jason Burt, who's chief football correspondent at The Telegraph. OK, gents, let's get to a potential transfer story involving a Newcastle striker who, by all accounts, has really made such a positive impact on not just the club but the Premier League, a very complete striker, and that's Alexander Isak. And the idea here on the right side of the back page of the Mail that Arsenal are monitoring him closely. Is he the final piece of the jigsaw? Maybe a little overstated, but Jonathan, is he, would he be a good fit and fit that number 9 role in that complete way that Arsenal would like?
Yeah, I mean, there were two there were two elements to this, and the first is, Arsenal have been tracking Isak for a while. There's been, for over a year, I think there's been talk about their interest. So obviously they've done their due diligence on him. They've tried to envisage where he would fit in, and obviously Kai Havertz has played brilliantly in the number 9 role. He's actually turned into a world-class number 9 for them, the world-class number 9 that they were probably hoping Gabriel Jesus would be. But obviously a player of Isak's quality, of his Premier League experience, is going to have an impact. And the other side of this is the Newcastle side. I mean, there's obviously been like in Craig's story that there's been no contract talks with Newcastle, and that there has been a lot of speculation over the last few weeks that the Saudis are not necessarily as invested or as interested in Newcastle as they maybe were at the time of the takeover, and whether this is just the latest sign of not apathy so much, but the Newcastle project is just one of so many that they're trying to spin now, and that maybe maintaining Newcastle as a Champions League force, as a even a title challenge one day is not necessarily the burning priority for them at the moment.
Just looking at Craig's piece, he is under contract, Jason, until 2028. Not only just because of his talent, his consistency, already his adaptation to the Premier League, but with that length of contract, I mean, it would take a quite significant fee, wouldn't it, to convince Newcastle to sell? Yeah,
I think it would do. And if you remember last season, Newcastle talked about the possibility of having to sell players because of PSR restrictions. And they made it very, very clear at that stage that one of the players they would definitely not be willing to sell was Alexander Isak. And as you say, he's got 3 years left on his contract. And as the story also says, both sides are fairly relaxed about the situation, although Isak's making it quite clear he wants to be playing in the Champions League. Arsenal, I reckon, would have to pay close to £100 million probably to even get Newcastle interested in a player like Isak. And whether or not Arsenal can afford to do that or want to do that remains to be seen, especially with a player who's got quite a long time left on his contract. But it's a sort of story that caused an awful lot of alarm amongst Newcastle supporters. I mean, he's obviously clearly their star player. He's done extremely well since he's gone to Tyneside. But you know, it's a situation that's been going on for quite a long time. I think even at the end of last season, there was talk of a new contract being signed as this was going to be sort of a shining new example of the sort of future for Newcastle, and that didn't happen. So I think the alarm bells have been there for some time. But as the story in the Mail says, you know, those talks have now stopped, and both sides are almost not in a standoff, but are sort of waiting to see what happens next.
I wonder how much Phil Foden would be worth right now, given his consistency, given the titles he's won, although perhaps not if he continues to suffer burnout. Jonathan, this back page of the Sun on the left-hand side, tired Phil, burnout like Rodri. And just looking at the quotes here in Ken Lawrence's piece, perhaps what surprises me is how Phil Foden is sort of trying to almost play this down, trying to normalise it, saying, I came back a little bit fatigued from his sort of 69-game season last season, which is normal. Rodri came back like that as well. A few players did. It's normal how many games we play. You have to burn out at some point. I mean, that for me feels, you know, actually even more shocking in some respects. It's almost quite defeatist. It's just, this is how it's going to be. But, you know, we're pointing and signalling at something. He's mentioned it. Rodri's mentioned it. How much will it take before actually this voice grows strong enough to change things?
Yeah, I mean, it's been normalised, but it's not normal, and in any sense, because, well, first of all, the players who were playing 60 games a season, like Foden was, you know, latter stages of all competitions, you know, Euros in the summer, you know, big international tournament, these are, it's 1% of professional footballers, you know, not even that. So these are, by definition, the players who are on the highest salaries, who garner the least sympathy, I guess, from the public when it comes to complaining about their workload. And yet these are the guys who make the spectacle. These are the guys who are at the pinnacle of the game, who set the standards, who make everyone fall in love with the game. And yeah, there does seem to be, certainly in the you know, the first few months of this season, there's been I think a growing groundswell of opinion that we have reached a kind of a point where players are going to say, this is not sustainable. We've been trying to sustain this for years and years, but we actually can't. Our bodies can't take it anymore. And, you know, that will be the point at which the game's authorities will either have to take action or, you know, just you know, do not take action, which is basically what they've been doing. But it's becoming increasingly hard to ignore.
Yeah, and when we saw not so long ago European leagues budding up with FIFA Pro, the sort of World Players Union, trying to take on FIFA as well, you know, with the expansion of the tournament and against player welfare as well. A couple of other stories we should really mark before we call time. Back page of the Telegraph, clubs alarm Nandi plan for regulators. So this is Lisa Nandi, the culture secretary, who, according to Tom Morgan in his piece, sparked alarm within the top tier by claiming that the status quo causes significant wage inflation in the Championship and also increased debt in the Premier League. And this is about the parachute payments, isn't it, Jason? So maybe you could just unpack this story a little bit more for us, for those who maybe aren't quite as close to it, and what's happening with the football regulator.
Well, it is a very complicated story, but obviously anything that sparks alarm in the Premier League, I tend to think is quite a good idea, because it's about time that they faced a bit more accountability. Now, obviously, in theory, we shouldn't really need a football regulator. Football should be able to regulate itself, but football's brought this upon itself. And this issue in particular is about the parachute payments, which the EFL have traditionally claimed basically unbalances things, because you have clubs coming down from the Premier League who get huge amounts of money that therefore give them a competitive advantage, that therefore gives them every chance to get back up, promoted back into the Premier League. The argument for giving these parachute payments is that these clubs need that windfall, that sort of cushion to help deal with the blow of being relegated. My argument would be that some of these clubs should have it built into their contracts in the first place, that if they do get regulated, then their finances obviously then adjust and they can cut their wages that way. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened often enough. It is happening much more often now. I have more sympathy with the EFL position because I think that money could be spread throughout the pyramid much more evenly and give everyone a bit more of the cash. And that also is at the heart of this story, really, is how the distribution of money, again, cannot be decided. And we've been talking about this for months, almost years now, about how that cash is going to be spread around the football club. And there is still no agreement. And, they talk about we don't need a regulator, but they can't reach agreement. So something has to give eventually. I understand the anger or annoyance or irritation about a regulator and the possibility of a regulator coming in. We don't really want government intervention. But at the same time, football really has brought this upon itself.
One final one, also in the Telegraph for you, Jonathan. It's an opinion piece written by Tom Gibbs, and it says trolls are taking over from the real fans. And this is pointing out this distinction between the fans who go to the games, their opinions, and then those who don't, but who live, football, I guess, just through the portal primarily of social media. What do you make of Tom's piece and his argument here that ultimately that feedback, we've got about a minute or so here, Jonathan, is going to be more valuable than actually the opinion of fans who go watch the games themselves in real life?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that all fan bases are dealing with. I mean, it's well documented. It's common currency how social media and particularly the tech platforms have basically monetized division. And this is now spread into the traditional media where you get clickbait, you get media outlets who basically troll for clicks, for anger, for division, for hate, and victimization. Yes, the platforms have a part to play, but also I think we need to. We as consumers, we get to choose what we click on. We get to choose what we give engagement to and credence to and currency to on the internet. And I think there comes a point at which we have to decide for ourselves what kind of internet we want to consume.
That is a very, very good point. We have agency in this. Thank you very much indeed, Jason and Jonathan. We're going to have to leave it there. If you missed any of the show, another chance to see Back Pages tonight at 5:30. It's also available as a podcast. Just download Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your pods.
Huge fixture, isn't it, at the top of the league? Liverpool against Arsenal. Michael Bridge is still with us. And, a lot of the talk ahead of this game is issues for Mikel Arteta.
Yeah. Friday, 1:30. Tomorrow, 1:30, Mikel Arteta's press conference. Loads to go out there. Arsenal, it's a worry because Saliba suspended, of course. Calafiori is a doubt after being taken off. Tomiyasu's out. Zinchenko's been recovering from a calf injury, so Miles Lewis-Skelly came on ahead of him at left-back. Martin Odegaard's still out. Bukayo Saka's a doubt. Jurrien Timber's a doubt. So it'll be interesting to see what Mikel Arteta says ahead of that and whether they've been training. That's quite a list. And we have said this for the last few weeks, haven't we? Because is it going to be down to injuries where we determine the title? But then Manchester City fans will be watching this saying, hold on, Michael, hold on, Pete. We've lost Rodri for the season. So let's get a better perspective. So we'll wait and see what Mikel Arteta says Friday, 1:30.
Yeah, absolutely right. So big question is, if they are missing all of these players, how do you think Arsenal might line up?
Well, I mean...
It's not bad, is it?
It's not bad, but, I mean, they do have some big players potentially missing. The first player that comes to mind there is Jakub Kiwior in for William Saliba. Of course, this is a guess, Arsenal fans. This isn't a definite, of course. But one position we know is key, David Raya. What a signing he's been. So it's either Zinchenko, Lewis-Skelly at left-back. As we said, Skelly did come on Tuesday against Shakhtar. Ben White, Mr. Dependable. Gabriel... Then Thomas Partey and Declan Rice.
He was struggling a bit, wasn't he? White, did he have a little bit of a knock-in? But he's going to be all right.
He missed he came on against City. Apparently he was ill at the start of the weekend. There's the forward line here. Does he go with Raheem Sterling? Does he go with Trossard there? It's all dependent. I think a big thing depends on Saka's injury, whether he's back. Martinelli's playing ever so well, though. He was excellent against Shakhtar. And then Kai Havertz up front. So... this is definitely a potential, a probable, but loads to ask Mikel Arteta tomorrow.
And Arsenal have got injury problems, suspensions and so on, like you say. But Liverpool and Arne Slot, everything he touches turns to gold at the minute, Mr. Slot, doesn't it? I mean, you've looked at his potential lineup, apart from, obviously, goalkeeper Alisson missing once again.
Absolutely, but, people were saying last night, is Kelleher the best number 2 you could bring in the Premier League? And I can totally understand that. And if he does move on eventually, if he doesn't now that first team spot down at Liverpool, you can imagine there'll be some serious clubs after him. The back four looks like it really picks itself. And what did we do throughout the transfer shows? Liverpool talking about getting in a number 6, but Gravenberch has been absolutely sensational in that position. Jones was player of the match against Chelsea at the weekend. You'd expect him to slot in against with Gravenberch. Diaz is the key because he was on the bench against Chelsea. Will it be him or Cody Gakpo? We'll wait and see. So Boslai there, Mo Salah with that penalty last week. He's looking confident.
And he, to be fair, Salah scored last night, didn't he? When he didn't, Nunes tapped it in. But it was already in. I mean, that was one of my goals, that one. It was the ball's already in, towed it in on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. But look, things are looking good for Liverpool at the moment. They say they've had a bit of a, not an easy start, but a start where they should be winning those games.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily buy that. I think everyone was looking at Liverpool and thinking, oh, no more Jurgen Klopp. It's all going to go downhill. I like Arne Slot. I like listening to him. I like his post-match interviews. I like what he said about Saturday, 12:30 games. I like him, Pete. I like him. But it's early days.
The 6 injury questions Mikel Arteta must answer before Arsenal faces Liverpool. There are 6 Arsenal players for whom Mikel Arteta needs to provide updates before the title clash against Liverpool. Arsenal returns to Premier League action this weekend after their victory over Shakhtar Donetsk in the Champions League on Tuesday night, as they prepare to host Liverpool at the Emirates Stadium. Arteta knows they cannot afford to lose and allow a 7-point gap to their title rivals, as it would severely damage their chances of winning the league. However, while that threat looms, Arteta must face the reality that his squad is running thin due to injuries. Arsenal is going through an injury crisis with key players, something unprecedented during Arteta's tenure, as new signings have yet to make their debuts, and both the club captain and vice-captain have suffered injuries during international duty. Before the Liverpool match, Arteta still has 6 key questions to answer. A press conference is scheduled for Friday, where Arteta will likely be asked about the status of these players. Bukayo Saka is certainly the most high-profile of the group. Speaking after the Shakhtar win, Arteta was not optimistic when speaking to Amazon Prime Sport. "I don't know if Saka will be fit to face Liverpool," said Arteta. "He hasn't been able to train yet, so it's unlikely." Jurrien Timber remained sidelined after suffering a muscle problem before the last international break. However, Arteta expressed hope that his return could be near. "I think he'll be close," Arteta said on Monday. "Obviously, we have to see how he handles training with the whole group because he hasn't done that yet, but hopefully, he'll be very close." Takahiro Tomiyasu has suffered yet another injury setback. The Japanese international returned from an issue against Southampton but seems to have come back too soon, as another problem has resurfaced. "We don't know," Arteta said when asked if the defender had suffered a setback. "I hope it doesn't look like a long spell out, but we have to see when he comes back and how he reacts to the load and impact on the pitch as well. We really need him, he's been incredible. The work rate, the hours he's put in to come back, he made it, and was in great shape and then picked something up. We're all with him, he needs our support, and hopefully, he'll be fine." Kieran Tierney also remains unavailable. Arteta has yet to provide an update on the Scotsman, but Football.London understands that it was a serious tendon issue suffered during the Euros, which is expected to keep him out for an extended period. Calafiori, meanwhile, was set to be assessed this week after suffering a knee issue on Tuesday night. Arteta said after the game, "With Ricky, it's something different, he felt something, and I don't know the extent, but it doesn't look like good news in that sense." Martin Odegaard also remained sidelined and was clearly not fit to play midweek, though Arteta has hinted at a potential return soon. Norway's coach, Ståle Solbakken, gave fans some hope by confirming they expect to see him potentially involved in November's international fixtures. "Everything indicates that things are going according to plan," he said. "So it's the final steps now, when you have to train with opponents and in team training. It depends on how he responds to that, but we have a legitimate hope that he'll be ready." Arteta will face the media on Friday. Football.London will provide live updates from the Sober Realty Training Centre.